The conversation about safe spaces on campus was reignited at Ryerson over the past few weeks. After the Ryersonian ran an article online regarding inflammatory comments that Dan Petz, member of the Ryerson Marketing Association, made on Facebook 2 weeks ago, the conversation got pretty heated online. We sat down yesterday with Petz and the VP of Equity from the Ryerson Students' Union, Rabia Idris, to talk about what safe spaces on campus look like and what we as a campus can do to better deal with them when we're talking about them in the future. The conversation also got pretty heated yesterday, but here's the debate in full. So, Rabia, just to get everybody on the same page here, can you explain what it is we're talking about when we talk about safe spaces?
Yeah, so in this conversation with safe spaces, we're going to talk about two different types of safe spaces. And so first is a safe space in the classroom. And that is basically allowing any student that's there with any sort of identity, any sort of background that they have, to be able to have a free flow of ideas. And the second sort of safe space we're talking about is a actual physical safe location for different identity groups. So for example, a student who is from the LGBT community will have a safe space on campus, which is kind of like a room that everybody else who is from that same community can come and get together, can organize. And right now on campus, we actually have 6 of those safe spaces. It's the RSU Equity Service Centers, and those are free from anybody who does not identify with that community to not enter that, and let that be kind of like one room on campus, aside from this whole huge campus to just organize basically.
So you're the VP of Equity for the Ryerson Students' Union, and you mentioned these equity centers, and you also mentioned that they're for these specific community groups.
Yeah.
What does that mean for these specific community groups? Does that mean that other community groups are excluded, or is it more of just a spot for these groups to meet? Can you elaborate?
Yeah. So it is basically a room on campus. That's what it is. It's like a room probably smaller than this, where they can talk about any sort of issues that that community is facing. And so the thing with creating solutions or events or anything with certain communities is to have people who are from that community themselves come and do the organizing, come and do the talking, come and do the solution making basically. And if we look at the whole campus itself, anybody is allowed to access it wherever. So for one group who is marginalized, who is oppressed, to ask for one room on campus just to organize, just to have that as kind of a safe space away from any sort of oppression or trigger, I don't think that would be too much to ask for. And so, for example, if there's an organizing meeting, I think it should be respected that if you don't come from that actual group, that you just let these people organize and create whichever events or anything that they want to do.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Dan, to loop you in, just to kind of catch everybody up who's watching, the Ryersonian ran a story on some comments that you made 2 weeks ago regarding these safe spaces that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
And you're the VP of Corporate Relations for Ryerson's Marketing Association, and you've been involved in student politics this year.
I'm also on the RSU as well.
Right. Exactly. So these comments included things like, just to quote, is, "Please, if you need a safe space, go home. You can be safe there. And I'm growing sick of this childish nonsense. I didn't pay thousands of dollars to be coddled like a little bitch. I am not going to take it anymore, and neither should you." What was kind of the inciting factor, for these comments? And
absolutely. Well, first of all, the reason I had to kind of use, such profane language was, to get a voice, to get me on stage, and look where I am now. We're talking about these issues, and to allude to the point where, go home, you can be safe there. I wasn't referring specifically to people who have abusive environments at home. We have channels and platforms where those people are taken care of. I was referring to people who simply don't have the emotional maturity to be in a university, an institution of higher learning. We're not running a daycare center here, okay? This is a university where you go to see differing viewpoints, and to be scrubbing the campus clean of differing viewpoints, of dissenting, political discourse, things like that, is really the antithesis of what a university is supposed to be. Students, I've had a vast majority of students who are afraid, some of them are here, who are afraid themselves to speak up and talk about certain things because of the intimidation, the bullying. It's really a bully tactic. It's not about being nice, it's about control. This is what this whole movement is about. And I really think that it's quite regressive. They say it's progressive, and Rabbi, you said it's a solution. Well, I actually think it's a symptom of a larger problem of extreme political correctness. It's not a solution at all. When you're segregating these people off, you're basically, this ideology doesn't want people as individuals. They want them as the identity. Black, white, brown, straight, gay, whatever. They want to put you in that bucket. They want to teach you what to think. They don't want to teach you how to think. It goes back to the days of Socrates. We used to teach people how to think critically. Now we're teaching them what to think. We're teaching them to have a very thin skin. We should be teaching people to have a thick skin. I mean, it's a tough world out there. And to be productive members of society and to fight for a better world, we need to have a thick skin. And it's really regressive, I think, these policies are.
So I guess to speak to that point, Rabia, there's criticism, I guess, in the general public that these safe spaces kind of, they create echo chambers and they inhibit, these critical conversations from reaching the people that need to hear them. Do you think that's a fair assessment? Do you think what Dan's saying is a fair assessment? Is there a way to combat that?
So again, a lot of people come from very different walks of life and experience very, very different things, right? You can't expect somebody to have a thick skin because that's how society works, right? You can't expect that. There are people who emotionally can't, physically can't, they just can't do it. And to expect them because that's how society works, you should not be blaming that person for not being able to do that. Maybe it's another look on society.
So you're saying they're immature, is what you're saying. They're too immature, is what you're saying.
You cannot equate that to immaturity, though.
Well, it's emotional immaturity.
Well, let's
you cannot, because sure, you may have a lot of great things that you can accomplish. You may have a really good support system. You may have a safe space at home kind of thing. A lot of students do not have that, and they carry that burden on them every time because they don't have supports, maybe on campus, maybe outside, maybe in the home, to basically help them with that. And the thing is, you can't expect them to overnight just to have that sort of ideology.
No, you're right, and that's why I think that.
So to speak to that point, I guess, to bring that back to you.
No, for sure, it's a good point.
These safe spaces, these spots on campus, they are, you're a member of an exec team on campus. I'm sure that you have these, private, closed-door meetings that, only your exec can be privy to. And Rabia, I'm sure that, the RSU
well, it's an
exec board
educational
does
function,
too.
but your point is made.
So, likewise in the newsroom, we have the same kind of things where there are only Ryersonian staff involved.
Sure.
And this isn't because we're attempting to, exclude people, but it's so that we can get to the heart of what the issues that our organizations needs to be focusing on and dealing with. Okay. And we're all on the same page on that, I'm imagining. But what is the difference, I guess, in your opinion?
Well, let me address what you're saying. Is the difference with something like an educational meeting and one of these meetings is that we're actually teaching people, like I said, putting them into buckets, teaching them to be victims. We're opening the door for victimhood, and when you teach that, it actually becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. People.
But what happens when they actually are victims and they are actually working towards creating a different environment where they themselves don't have to be the victim anymore?
That's a good thing, and that that should be something we should be emphasizing. See, the people on the left, they're obsessed with equal outcome when they should be equal outcome of the collective, their herd mentality. They should be focused on equal opportunity of the individual, of individual rights. These people have individual rights. They're individuals with individual skill sets. This mentality, this ideology that you're proposing is herd mentality. You're collectivizing people. And what made our society so great is the individual, not the collective. That's like other stuff. That's like Soviet Union stuff. And it's leading down a very slippery slope. When you're censoring free speech on campus, when you claim to be the VP Equity, but when you're kicking out...
Well, she is the VP Equity.
You're claiming to be equal. When you're kicking out white students because of the color of their skin at a racialized students collective, having that policy on the books,
but when
that's not very good.
When white students themselves are not racialized, I don't
how do you know that? You're racializing me right now by saying I can't go to these spaces.
So see, that's another thing. There's a lot of learning and unlearning that I see that you need to do.
You need to do the learning.
No.
Well,
okay, so to tamper down and step back, the conversation around these safe spaces and where they're places on campus, it is obviously a sensitive issue, as we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
But, that doesn't mean, that the criticism and being talked about in a critical way isn't necessary. Looking forward, what can we as a school community, do to ensure that we're treating this issue with the sensitivity and the tact that is required when we're questioning these issues? What can we do?
So a lot of the Equity Service Centers actually hold a lot of events where any student on campus can come and learn about why these Equity Service Centers exist and why these students have issues and why these issues are valid.
Okay.
Right? And so what I do is I ask anybody who kind of questions why these centers exist to please come out to these events and actually try and learn with an open mind. Like, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to what you say. I'm a business student, I totally, I can understand where you're coming from, but I can be critical of a lot of things that you say, the same that you're going to be critical with a lot of things that I say. But again, just try and learn. Hear the other person out of why they are collecting, why they're
I do totally understand what you're saying, but I'm actually saying that it's working against the goal of what you're trying to achieve. Because again, you're fulfilling the self-fulfilling prophecy. You're obsessed with equal outcome of the collective, but you should be focusing on the individual rights and the equal opportunity of the individual. Not outcome, opportunity is what you should be focusing on. And
I don't get it. Can you be a little more specific? Yeah, I'm totally lost on that.
I think just re-clarify what you're
what I'm saying is that, it's the herd mentality, right? Like, everybody who's in one group, they put them in the bucket of whatever segment is, say it's straight or white. You put them in the bucket, you teach them, now they're in this bucket, now they're part of this collective, and now the collective is taught what to think and what to get offended by. And you see people all over campus that are of these racialized or are of different demographics, but they don't need the safe space because they're smarter than that. They are more emotionally mature.
See, that's the thing. You can't tell people what safe space they do and do not need. That's on their own self to ask if they need a safe space.
Well, you're right. We've created a society where people need safe spaces, and you're absolutely right. And I think that we need to reverse these steps. So I think the first step is we should restructure these safe spaces so people still have an opportunity to speak about their issues. I think that's important. I think we should restructure these safe spaces into student groups so the potential for abuse is removed. The potential for abuse of segregation is removed. We can't be segregating students with public funds.
What is potential for abuse kind of, what are you
the potential for abuse is at a safe space. You have the two white kids in the event, the Racialized Students Collective, getting kicked out. See, I don't find that acceptable. And as a VP Equity, you should be, totally outraged by that.
Not really, because if it's talking about, can you please not make noises back there? Anyway, so if you are talking about issues that racialized students face, right? If I am talking in a classroom, there's going to be white people, black people, everybody around, and they can listen, right? If I want to talk specific issues that racialized students face, I do not think that white people need to be in that space. Because racialization is people who are other than white. That's what being racialized is.
So you're basically drawing a battle line between.
That's the thing. Like,
what I see is happening is that they're demonizing white people.
Well, okay,
they're drawing battle lines.
Back up. When we've heard kind of what the response is. So Dan, what would you propose?
Yeah,
as
great question.
As the fix, kind of, what are you saying you want to see happen to these safe spaces in the future?
It can't be done overnight. These people have become dependent on these safe spaces. So we should have a place. I believe that they would be better called student groups than safe spaces. A lot of people think safe spaces are ridiculous. If you go into the real world, they're all talking about it. It actually discredits the value of the university.
Going out into the real world.
I think that we should restructure the safe space into student groups so people still have a platform to talk about their issues.
Okay.
I think that we could both agree on that. So you agree that people should be able to speak about their issues. I agree on that as well.
100%.
And I think that restructuring them would get rid of a lot of the problems and a lot of the stigma around the safe spaces, because again, it's discrediting the university by basically turning the university into a daycare center. And I think it's totally regressive. It's not progressive at all.
Okay, so I guess to end off, Rabia, do you want to rebut any of that?
Yeah, I guess another thing to ask is, who are the people that actually have these problems? That's what I want to know.
Sorry?
Who are the people that have these problems?
Have what problems?
Right, problems with safe spaces. It's people who do not access safe spaces. That's the thing, it's people who do not need safe spaces.
Well, it's an issue of free speech in society.
But see, that's the thing. We have free speech, but there's a limit to that free speech. If your free speech is impeding on somebody's right to exist, impeding on somebody's right to basically
There's no limits to free
say whatever
speech in a free country. This is something that's a fundamental disagreement.
If you say something discriminatory against me as being a woman, being a Muslim woman as well, you do not have that right to free speech.
I have the right to do it. Within the law, I do have that right. So you need to read the Constitution.
Oh, I think you do as well.
You're right,
Again, there's a lot of protections.
There is a difference between harassment.
Okay.
I don't agree with harassment, but I agree with free speech. And people need to realize, I don't agree with hate speech, but hate speech is free speech. To an extent. If you're harassing or threatening someone, I don't agree with that. I'm not a mean person. You say the idea is I don't care about these people because I'm denouncing safe spaces. It's the opposite. I care about these people, and I think that the safe spaces are working against the end goal. When you're segregating yourselves off into ever shrinking subsets of the population, you're actually being regressive. You're not being progressive at all.
Okay.
Is there any last closing point? We've heard from Dan on where he wants to leave. Where do you want to leave off with this?
Again, the thing I want to end off with is that you're basically speaking on behalf of people who need safe spaces and telling them what is good for them. I do not have the right to tell the LGBT community what's good for them because I'm not from the community. I have no right to tell them what to do.
Well, I have the right to say whatever I want, really.
You do, but it depends on who's listening. If
Not
they
really.
don't, it says they don't have to listen.
That's what Rabia finished what she's saying.
Yeah, they don't have to listen to you. Most likely will not. They will keep on organizing. Racialized people will keep on organizing.
So, okay,
I just want one rebuttal to that point.
Well, I think
so
we've reached our time limit, so we're going to say, I think we've reached our time limit.
Then why do they care about what other people say? If they're not listening to what I'm saying, why are they so
affected? We've reached our time limit, so thank you both for joining us today. We really look forward to continuing this discussion, further on campus. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, it's canceled. No longer politically correct at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. A student group putting out a list of words it doesn't think students should use, ever. Some of the words on that list? Yeah, politically correct. Oh, lame, that's also canceled. And crazy, don't ever